Last week we looked at the top 5 best Total War games, so naturally it's only fair to look at the top 5 worst as well. Hello, my name is MrSmartDonkey and welcome to my top 5 worst Total War games. To reiterate my request from last week's video, please remember this is a completely subjective and thus personal list. I am not rating these games in any official way other than my own personal experiences and preferences. Keep that in mind before commenting. I will likely turn some heads and piss some people off in this video, but please refrain from strangling me in your thoughts, I can't read them. With that out of the way, let's get started. I'm starting this list with a bit of an odd one, Total War Battles Shogun. I bet a great many of you didn't even realize this game existed, but unfortunately it does. This is also a good moment to tell you I considered every single Total War game when making these lists, including spin-offs, with the only exception being Spartan Total Warrior, as it is a hack and slash game for consoles only and doesn't have a whole lot to do with strategy, although it is a fantastic game and you should play it if you never have. Back to the game at hand though, Total War Battles Shogun. This game came out a year after Shogun 2, but unlike its big brother, isn't very good. A large part of that is probably the fact that it's a mobile game, although it was released on PC as well, which is the only reason I ever played it. That said, it isn't actually available on Steam anymore, the store page has since been removed. While I'm sure there's a perfectly logical explanation for that, I'm gonna say it's because the game sucked, and they were ashamed of its very existence. I should probably talk about the actual game for a bit though. Unfortunately, it's been so many years since I played this game, and it was such a forgettable experience, I barely remember any of it, but I'll try my best anyway. The objective of the gameplay is to defend your base while attacking the enemies. This is done on a battlefield that spans from the left side of the screen to the right, divided into a bunch of hexagonal spaces. On these spaces you build some buildings, and those buildings either gather resources or recruit units. You deploy those units to complete the aforementioned objective. There's a couple different units and each one has its pros and cons in a rock paper scissors fashion. While the idea doesn't sound bad, you have to remember this is a mobile game and thus meant to be played in short bursts. If you're playing this on PC for a few hours on end, you're gonna get bored rather quickly, not to mention you'll finish the game before long as it is quite short. Now, for my closing words, don't get me wrong, the game isn't as terrible as I make it out to be. If it didn't share the Total War name and if you play it knowing it's a mobile game, it's quite alright. But, as it is a Total War game, a series known for its grand strategy PC games, this does not live up to the usual standards, not by a long shot. Moving on to number 4, where I have placed Attila. Total War Attila is a very interesting game for me, because the one thing I have said about it basically since its release is that this game would be so much better if it didn't have Attila in it. Which is ironic, seeing how he's the key character in this game, but hear me out. Before most of the Attila faction pack DLCs were released, most of the playable factions started in Western Europe, all relatively close to where Attila started, which means a few things happened. If you were lucky enough to have Attila not attack you, at least for a while, it means that he was attacking others, and thus razing most if not all the provinces around you, meaning expansion was slow and tedious. If you weren't lucky enough to have that happen, and Attila set his gaze on you, that was usually the end of the campaign, as it was almost impossible to kill off the Hun faction. In order to destroy the faction, you had to kill Attila 3 times in battle, which was hard enough as it was, because the Hun faction didn't consist of just Attila, he had several other overpowered armies all attacking you as well. And even if you managed to kill those armies off, they would just spawn back in a province over the next turn and come back for round 2, 3, 4, you get the gist of it. Even if you did destroy those armies every few turns, it would get more and more difficult as you went on, because while the Huns get a free new stack every other turn, you aren't replenishing and even taking attrition in some cases, as the Hun armies stop you from replenishing by simply existing in your territory, and on top of that they steal a portion of your food as well, so more often than not you'd be in deficit. Honestly, I could go on and on about this, but perhaps since I played it years ago things have changed, and some of these things were never even a problem on lower difficulties, but on Legendary the game just simply wasn't any fun. However, it must be said that there were some DLCs that had factions start in a different part of the world, which were far more fun, because you didn't have to deal with the bullshit that was Attila and the Huns. And I should also note that the Age of Charlemagne DLC was one of the best campaign DLCs that CA has ever released for any Total War game. I just can't enjoy Attila anymore, because Attila ruined it. It's time to start pissing some people off with number 3, Napoleon. More than ever do I want to remind you this is a completely personal list, based on personal experiences and should not be seen as me bad-mouthing certain games. Napoleon is a great example of this, because I'm pretty sure Napoleon is a fairly solid Total War game, or so people tell me all the time. I wouldn't know, because I never touched it. Although that isn't strictly true, because I believe I may have played a custom battle or two. So now you ask, why did you put Napoleon on this list if you've never even played it? And that's a fair question. The reason I put Napoleon on this list is because of the era it takes place in. I personally just could not give two flying fucks about the Napoleonic era. It has guns in it, and I don't like guns. I explained this to some extent in the top 5 best Total War games video as well, where I put Fall of the Samurai on number 2 despite me not liking line battles, but somehow despite it taking place in a similar time, it's much more appealing to me. I've never really considered myself a weeb. I don't watch anime and I don't take a particular fancy in Japanese culture, but in this one particular case, I suppose maybe I am. I don't really care about European history during Napoleon's time, whereas the Japanese history is fascinating to me, despite its European influences. Perhaps because it was such a clash of cultures and the two started to mix together in Fall of the Samurai makes it interesting to me. I honestly can't tell you the exact reason, but that's the way it is. So to reiterate, I don't think Napoleon is a bad game. In fact, I believe many people regard it as their favorite, but because I have almost zero interest in the era, I cannot make myself play this game when there are plenty of other Total War games of which I prefer the era. After seeing my number 3, I think number 2 shouldn't really come to any surprise. Empire. I'm not going to talk about this one for too long, because as you might understand, my reasoning is the same as for Napoleon. I suppose I should explain why I placed Empire higher up on the list, and the reason for that is because I believe Napoleon is regarded as the better game of the two. Over the years I have heard many more bad things about Empire than about Napoleon, although I should mention that I believe Darth Mod is supposed to be fantastic for Empire. That said, once again I wouldn't know, as I haven't played a campaign on Empire since I purchased the game back in 2009. And even then I only put an hour or two into it. Perhaps the reason I bought it back then is because the cover looked somewhat similar to that of Age of Empires 3, which is one of my all-time favorite games, even though it takes place in the same era. Ironic, isn't it? After having made some enemies of my previous few entries, I believe I will win some favor with this number 1 choice. Total War Battles Kingdom. This game was a blatant cash grab by Creative Assembly, another mobile game that was also released on PC. This is one of those games where you build your shitty kingdom in a tedious process of waiting for stuff to build. But, of course, rather than waiting, you could also just buy some in-game currency with real money to speed the process up. So get out your mom's credit card and get paying. Seriously though, this game should have never existed in the first place, and it's no surprise it died as fast as it came. Now don't get me wrong, there are millions of people who enjoy these types of games. Just look at Clash of Clans, Viking War of Clans, or Lords Mobile. And I'm not going to sit here and say they are terrible. I personally don't see the appeal, but there are clearly many that do. Total War Battles Kingdom might be the best one of them. It might have been the greatest mobile game ever to be made, but that does not make it a good Total War game. This is similar to the point I made about Total War Battles Shogun, but at least that game wasn't a cash grab. It was a legitimate attempt to get some mobile gamers interested in Total War. I don't know what this game is, but it's not the Total War that I know and love, and I sincerely hope that Creative Assembly will never try something similar again. That's gonna do it for this top 5 worst Total War games list. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, but keep it civil. As I mentioned before, this is a subjective list and based on personal experiences only. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you like these types of videos. Thank you very much for watching, have a good day, and goodbye.